You're trying to feed your family, right? Maybe some broccoli with dinner, a few carrots for the kids' lunches, just like Health Canada recommends. But today's Canadian grocery stores are not always giving you what you think. Some of that produce may be sitting in warm back rooms for longer than it should, could carry pesticide residues that other countries regulate more aggressively, and is often labeled fresh when it's already near the end of its life. This is not the food your parents bought. And what we're about to uncover will show you why grocery shopping at these 5 chains might be more of a gamble than you realize. Starting with Loblaws, Canada's largest grocery chain that controls close to 30% of the country's food market through brands like No Frills, Real Canadian Superstore, Zehrs, and others. You'd think that kind of power would mean better quality control. A lot of shoppers aren't so sure. In recent years, Loblaws has been called out online after customers claim they found new Best Before stickers placed over older dates on packaged foods. One shopper in the GTA posted photos of a product where peeling back the top label revealed an earlier expiry date underneath. When situations like this get raised in-store, managers often blame labeling errors. But to customers, it looks like the chain is squeezing every last day out of aging stock. There hasn't been a big court case or regulator slamming Loblaws for this, but those viral posts have definitely damaged trust. And that's just what shows on the label. Behind the scenes, some people who say they've worked in Loblaws' produce departments have described practices that would make you think twice. In anonymous posts, one self-described employee from a Brampton area store claimed that during busy periods, refrigerated deliveries were sometimes left on the loading dock or in back rooms for hours before they were put into coolers. Management, they said, was more focused on getting the floor stocked by the end of the shift than on how long the boxes had sat in transit. That's not what food safety guidelines recommend. Health Canada generally warns that perishable foods shouldn't be left at room temperature for more than about 2 hours, and less than that in warm conditions. So even if nothing looks wrong, that spinach you're putting in your smoothie might not have had the chilled chain you assume, especially if the store is understaffed or overwhelmed. Then there are the recalls. In 2023, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency issued a recall for pre-cut butternut squash sold at certain Loblaw-affiliated stores due to possible listeria contamination. The warning told customers not to consume the product because of potential serious health risks. By the time a recall like that gets posted, the product has usually already been on shelves for days. It's hard not to wonder how many families had already served it for dinner. Everyday shoppers across Canada echo these concerns. On Reddit communities dedicated to Loblaws, customers routinely share horror stories. One Toronto shopper said they bought a package of strawberries that looked perfect through the plastic, but every single berry was moldy underneath when they got home. Another from Calgary described buying fresh asparagus from Superstore that turned to slime within 24 hours, even though the best before date was still a few days away. The pattern many shoppers see is this. Loblaws is a master at making produce displays look good. Perfect lighting, misting systems, and front-facing labels, while the actual freshness can be hit or miss. When you shop at Loblaws, you're not just paying inflated prices during a cost-of-living crisis, you're trusting that the cold chain, labeling, and quality checks have all been handled properly. And, based on what customers and former staff say online, that trust isn't always rewarded. Now let's talk about Metro. With hundreds of stores across Ontario and Quebec, Metro positions itself as a premium, neighborhood grocery option. It's the kind of place that markets fresh and local heavily. But a premium logo doesn't automatically mean premium handling. Food inspection reports across Canada show that even big-name grocery stores can be written up for issues like mold on cooler gaskets, debris under shelves, or fridges running a little warmer than they should. While specific reports aren't always easy for the public to access, shoppers in Montreal's Plateau and other urban areas have posted online about strange smells near the produce section. condensation dripping from cooler units, and wilted greens that don't match the chain's upscale image. One customer described noticing a musty smell around the lettuce section week after week, and only later connecting it, in their mind, to stories about mold building up on refrigeration systems in older stores. We don't have a front-page headline naming a particular metro for this, but if you've ever walked past a greens display that smells off, you know how unsettling that can be. Consumer watchdog shows like CBC Marketplace have also tested how fast produce from major chains goes bad at home. The exact rankings change depending on the item and store, but the broader takeaway is that by the time vegetables hit the shelf, they've already used up a chunk of their shelf life sitting in warehouses, trucks, and back rooms. Many shoppers say Metro's vegetables, in particular, sometimes wilt or develop soft spots faster than they'd expect for fresh product. Whether that's Metro-specific or just a symptom of big chain logistics is hard to prove from the outside. Former employees who say they've worked in Metro produce departments tell a similar story in anonymous posts. One person from an Ottawa area store claimed that deliveries came only a couple of times a week, and in summer you could feel the heat coming off some of the boxes when they arrived. According to their account, staff were told to spray everything down with cold water, get it on display, and move on. Management allegedly brushed off concerns with a simple line: "Customers won't notice." Customers do notice. A shopper in Laval shared a video of a bag of pre-washed greens bought the same day it was stocked, only to find brown, slimy leaves when they opened it. Another in Toronto posted about bell peppers that collapsed inward when lightly squeezed, like they'd been frozen and thawed at some point in the supply chain. Metro, like other big chains, also makes heavy use of value packs and markdowns. Several people who say they've worked there claim that older produce is routinely pulled, mixed with newer items, and repackaged as stir-fry mixes, fruit medleys, or manager's specials. On its own, repurposing slightly older produce isn't illegal and can reduce waste, but if shoppers assume everything in the pack is equally fresh, they may be getting more of yesterday's rejects than they think. When you shop at Metro, you're paying premium prices for produce that may have already done a long, bumpy trip before you ever see it. The store brands itself as your neighborhood fresh market, but many employees and customers online suggest that, behind the scenes, it faces the same cold chain and rotation problems as every other big box grocer. Let's move to Sobeys, including their discount brands like Freshco and Foodland. Sobeys operates over 1,000 stores nationwide, but bigger doesn't automatically mean safer or fresher. Over the years, customers and employees have shared stories about how prepared vegetables and deli items are handled in some Sobeys-owned stores. In anonymous posts, workers talk about deli coolers that don't always hold a perfect 4 degrees Celsius, or cut vegetables sitting out on prep tables longer than guidelines really allow when the store is slammed. In theory, managers are supposed to toss anything that's spent too long in the danger zone. In practice, some staff say they're pressured to get it out and sell it, unless it's obviously spoiled. Food inspectors across Canada do sometimes cite grocery stores, including Sobeys banners, for things like holding prepared foods at slightly elevated temperatures or not documenting temperature checks properly. Those infractions don't always become big news stories, but they're a reminder that even recognizable chains make mistakes behind the deli counter. Sobeys has also had its share of product recalls over the years, including recalls involving ready-to-eat salads and cut vegetables supplied to multiple retailers due to potential listeria contamination. These recalls weren't unique to Sobeys, but they show how vulnerable pre-cut produce is if anything slips in processing or handling. Then there's the pesticide question. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency's own surveillance reports show that a small percentage of imported fruits and vegetables tested each year contain pesticide residues above Canadian limits, and some of those pesticides are banned or restricted in parts of Europe. Those products can end up on shelves at any major chain: Sobeys, Loblaws, Metro, Walmart, depending on the supplier. The packaging may look clean and reassuring, But what's on the skin or in the leaves is harder to see. On the consumer side, shoppers sometimes report finding unexpected extras in their produce. In one well-publicized case a few years back, Atlantic Canadians found a large beetle inside packaged organic greens sold at big chain stores supplied by Sobeys. The company refunded customers, but it was a pretty vivid reminder that even triple-washed and organic doesn't mean perfect. Former employees from Sobeys-owned banners like Foodland have also talked online about subtle tricks to keep displays looking full, burying softer zucchinis or cucumbers in the middle of a pile, or positioning the freshest-looking items on top while hoping older ones sell before anyone notices. It's not an official policy Sobeys would admit to, but it's how some frontline workers say they're told to manage shrink and waste. When you shop at Sobeys and its discount cousins, you're trusting that those internal systems, coolers, temperature logs, and rotation rules, are being followed exactly as head office intends. The reality, at least from what frontline staff and shoppers describe, is messier. Now let's talk about Walmart Canada. Walmart is the master of low prices, but those savings can come with trade-offs that show up right in the produce section. In late 2024, for example, one of Walmart's suppliers recalled market-side brand broccoli florets, a product sold at Walmart, over concerns about possible listeria contamination. Regulators urged people not to eat it. As with most recalls, by the time the alert went out, the product had already been shipped and displayed. That doesn't mean Walmart knowingly sold anything unsafe, but it shows how long the chain of trust really is between the farm, the processing facility, and your shopping cart. Online, people who say they work or have worked in Walmart produce departments paint a picture that's not always flattering. Anonymous staff from locations in Alberta and Ontario talk about regularly receiving produce in rough shape, browning lettuce, berries with mold starting in the corners, tomatoes already bruised. According to some of these accounts, the standard response wasn't always throw it out, but rather pick off the worst bits and put the rest on display. If customers complained, they'd get a refund or exchange, but many shoppers don't spot the problem until they're home. Several current and former employees also claim that timely refrigeration is a constant struggle. Big weekend deliveries can arrive late at night or during understaffed shifts. In those scenarios, pallets of cucumbers, lettuce, and peppers may sit in the back room longer than ideal before anyone has time to move them into cold storage. Most stores try to avoid truly dangerous delays, but a few hours at room temperature can still shave days off the shelf life of fresh produce, even if it never technically crosses a legal line. Sanitation can be another weak point. Shoppers have posted videos and photos of fruit flies hovering around produce displays, including mushrooms and soft fruits, at some Walmart locations. In many cases, staff will eventually pull the affected product and clean the area, but 2 days of visible pests on food is enough to scare off anyone who sees it. Labeling is another area where big chains, including Walmart, have been criticized. Investigations by Canadian media and regulators have caught major grocers using signage that says "Product of Canada" or "Local" above bins of fruits and vegetables that are clearly labeled from Mexico or the United States at the item level. Sometimes this seems to be a genuine store-level mistake. Other times it looks more like wishful marketing. Either way, it leaves shoppers unsure of what they're really buying and what kinds of farming standards or pesticide rules apply. And then there are the everyday customer experiences you don't see on the news. Someone in Quebec opening a bag of so-called fresh green beans to find them covered in white fuzz, or a family in BC discovering that their just-arrived berries already smell off. These stories are mostly shared in Facebook groups and Reddit threads, not formal complaints, but they add up to a picture where rock-bottom prices sometimes correlate with corner-cutting or overstretched staff. At Walmart, you might save a couple of dollars on a bag of carrots, but you're also buying into a supply chain that stretches farther, turns inventory faster, and often puts enormous pressure on a small crew of workers to keep everything looking good, no matter how the product arrived. Finally, let's look at Save On Foods, a Western Canadian chain with over 170 stores, primarily in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Yukon Save-On markets itself as community-focused and quality-driven. For many people in BC especially, it feels like the nice neighborhood option compared to the big national players. But again, what you see on the floor and what happens behind it can be different. Health inspection records in Western Canada show that even respected regional chains sometimes get flagged for signs of pests in storage areas, dirty equipment, or temperature control issues. The specific store names don't always make headlines, but inspectors do occasionally find things like droppings near dry goods or produce storage, and then require deep cleans and follow-up visits. Save On Foods isn't singled out in every public report, but it's another big player operating under the same constraints as everyone else. Former produce clerks who say they've worked at Save On have posted about how the chain loves dump bins, those big, inviting containers of loose carrots, peppers, or cucumbers. According to these workers, those bins don't always get emptied and scrubbed as often as you'd hope. Instead, new deliveries are sometimes poured right on top of older stock. That means whatever's at the bottom can be noticeably older than what you see on top, and it can explain why some customers say their veggies go limp or slimy within a day or two. Customers in BC and Alberta have complained online about buying vegetables at Save On that spoil surprisingly fast. Organic carrots that turn rubbery and weird inside within 24 to 48 hours, or bags of salad mix that smell off even though the printed date says there's plenty of time left. None of this proves a conspiracy, but it does suggest that rotation and cold chain might not always be perfect at the store level. Then there's cosmetic touch-up. Multiple people claiming to be Save On employees have talked about trimming brown edges off lettuce, wiping down soft peppers, or pulling obviously moldy berries from the top of a clamshell and then putting the container back out if the remaining fruit still looks good. Technically, staff in any produce department are allowed to cull and clean product, but once you start patching up aging items just enough to keep them moving, shoppers are no longer seeing the full story of what they're buying. Save On also sells a lot of pre-cut vegetable trays, fruit cups, and salads. These are high-convenience and high-risk items. In at least some Western Canadian inspections, regulators have noted that grocery stores need better documentation around how long cut produce sits out during prep and how cold it's kept afterward. If those logs are missing or incomplete, it doesn't automatically mean the food is unsafe, but it does mean the store can't prove it was handled as carefully as it should have been. When you shop at Save On Foods, you're buying into the brand promise of community and quality. But if you listen to the workers and customers talking online, you'll hear a more complicated story, one where backroom realities, staffing levels, and cost pressures sometimes chip away at that promise. So where should you buy your vegetables? No grocery store is perfect, and any chain can have a bad day or a bad batch. But based on food safety records, public recalls, and what shoppers consistently report, you may have better odds of fresher, better-handled produce at places like Whole Foods Market. Prices are higher, but they tend to have stricter quality and sourcing standards, and they move through a lot of produce quickly. Farm Boy, Ontario, known for fast stock rotation and fresh displays. Because it's smaller and more focused, issues can be spotted and fixed faster. Local farmers markets. When you buy direct from growers, there's less time in warehouses and trucks, and you can actually ask questions about how the food was grown and handled. Independent grocers, smaller operations often rely on reputation and word of mouth. If they mess up produce, they hear about it fast. You might pay a bit more per bag or bunch, but you're also avoiding some of the long, opaque supply chains and stressed backrooms that the biggest chains rely on. So which store shocked you the most? Have you had your own produce nightmare at any of these chains, or anywhere else? Drop your experience in the comments below. Other Canadians need to know what you've seen. Knowledge is power. Now you know what kinds of problems to watch for and what questions to ask. Check for condensation inside plastic packaging. Smell your greens. Press your tomatoes gently. If something feels off, trust your gut and put it back. Your family's health is worth more than a sale price. If you found this eye-opening, hit that like button and subscribe for more Canadian consumer investigations. And if you want to see which restaurant chains you should think twice about, click the video on your screen right now.